Hello everyone. Today I will talk about this work on the accuracy of on-chain timestamps. I'm Apostolos Tzinas from the National Technical University of Athens and Common Prefix, and this is joint work with Srivatsan Sridhar and Dionysis Zindros from Stanford. The accuracy of on-chain timestamps seems to be critical for the security of many applications built on top of blockchains. Let's start off with a timestamp manipulation attack to see why. Consider there is a lottery taking place in the real world at exactly midnight. Some lucky numbers will be selected to determine the winner. Now, some authorized ticket seller decides to sell tickets on the blockchain. So how can people buy their tickets? First of all, it has to be before midnight, and what they can do is submit a transaction on the blockchain committing to some lucky numbers. And this transaction will eventually get included into a block that will get included into the stable chain. Now, every block comes with a timestamp. This timestamp, it's put there by the block creator, and it represents the real world time at the time of creation of the block. Now, a lottery ticket can only be bought inside a block that it has a timestamp that it's before midnight. So suppose that there is a smart contract there that checks if the timestamp in this block is before midnight, and only then a ticket can be bought inside this block. Otherwise, the transaction will fail. So, another ticket can be bought in the next block that gets included into the stable chain, because this block also has a timestamp that it's before midnight, and then 3 more tickets can be bought in the next block that also has a timestamp before midnight. Now, at exactly midnight in the real world, the lottery takes place and certain numbers are drawn. Now, here's the key of the attack. Eve, just a few seconds after midnight, has already observed these winning lottery numbers. Now, what Eve can do is she can create an adversarial block that has a timestamp that it's before midnight. And then, since she knows the winning numbers, she can buy the winning ticket inside that block. Notice that the block that Eve created was created after midnight. However, Eve adversarially put there a timestamp that it's before midnight in order to be able to buy this ticket. Okay, now Eve has managed to win the lottery by manipulating the timestamps that are reported on the blockchain. So it seems that in some cases it is important for timestamps reported on chain to be relatively accurate. This is a property that we introduce in this work and we call timeliness. What is timeliness? A blockchain protocol has timeliness parameterized by V if all blocks entering the stable chain anew have a timestamp that it's not older than V rounds. Let's see what this means with an example. Now consider that we have a blockchain protocol with timeliness V. Here we have an honest party, and the protocol proceeds in rounds. So in the first round, the honest party outputs the Genesis block as its stable chain. The Genesis block is considered, by definition, an honest block and has a timestamp of the time of its creation. So that's why we represent it with the green color. Let's see what the green color means. It means that the timestamp of a green block is greater than R minus V, where R is the current round and V is the timeliness parameter V. Okay, now in the next round, some time has passed, and as you can see, the green block, the green Genesis block has turned yellow. That means that the timestamp inside this block has become older. be aware that the timestamp does not change. It's just that time has passed, and hence the timestamp has become older. Although yellow still means a relatively recent timestamp, the timestamp of yellow blocks is still greater than r minus v. But yellow means that the timestamp is older than a green block. Additionally, a new block we see enters the stable chain here. This is a green block. It's relatively recent, and for this block to be valid, it must have a timestamp that it's after or at the same time of the block that it extends. So, in order to have a valid chain, the timestamp inside the blocks of that chain need to be non-decreasing. Okay, so this block could only become green or yellow here. Okay, in the next round, the Genesis block from yellow becomes red. Red still means that the timestamp is greater than r minus v, but it's still older than yellow and green. And also, the second block here from green, it becomes yellow. But now notice that a third block enters the stable chain. The color of this block is yellow. It's not green like usually blocks entering the chain, but that means that its timestamp, the timestamp recorded inside this block, is not extremely recent, but it is still recent, because the timestamp of this block is still greater than r minus v. So remember what timeless says. It says that all blocks entering the stable chain anew must have a timestamp that is greater than r minus v. Okay, so that's timeless is not violated here. Okay, now in the next round, the Genesis block from red, it becomes black. That means that the timestamp inside this block is now less than or equal to r minus v, where r is the current round and v is the timeless parameter v. Now we say that the timestamp inside this block now is mature. The block has matured, right? The timestamp inside this block is not recent anymore. And also the rest of the blocks start to become, the timestamps start to become older. Now, in the next round, the rest of the two blocks will also become mature. Their timestamps will become old enough. But now, what would happen if another block came in that's already black and tries to extend the stable chain? Well, that would break timeliness. Why? Because timeliness says that all blocks that enter the stable chain anew must have a timestamp that is greater than r minus v. This is an already mature block. This is a block with an old timestamp that is less than or equal to r minus v. So that would violate timeliness. Okay, so timeliness says that only blocks with relatively recent timestamps can enter the chain anew. Protocols that have this property, we call them timely protocols. And to see the benefits of timely protocols, let's go back to the initial timestamp manipulation attack. Okay, remember that at exactly midnight, a lottery is taking place in the real world, and an authorized ticket seller has decided to sell tickets on the blockchain. A valid ticket is when it is included inside a block that it's before midnight. Now consider that the blockchain here that is being used is timely V. It has timeliness V. Now the ticket seller can take advantage of this property and basically stop selling tickets V rounds before midnight. Okay, now how has this helped? Now, a few seconds after midnight, after Eve has already observed the winning lottery numbers, she cannot create a new block that has a timestamp that it's old enough, midnight minus V, to buy the winning lottery ticket inside this block, because this would violate timeliness. So you cannot introduce into the stable chain a new block that has a very old timestamp, right? So this is the idea of timeliness and how it can be helpful. In fact, every protocol, every already deployed protocol that uses some kind of deadline using timestamps might be vulnerable to this attack if the protocol designers are not careful and don't take into consideration this timeless parameter V. Later in this presentation, we will show that popular blockchain protocols like Bitcoin, Cardano, and Streamet are indeed timely under the assumption of a synchronous network and synchronized clocks. This may not come as a surprise, since everybody seems to already trust that the blockchain timestamps are mostly accurate. In this work, we confirm this belief by formally proving timeliness for these protocols, and we also calculate the timeliness parameter V for these protocols. However, before we do this, let's assume that we have timely blockchain protocols. And let's first explore a very interesting property that arises from timeliness. We call this property super safety. A blockchain protocol is super safe, has super safety, when all parties output the exact same chain, the exact same stable chain, at the exact same time. Okay, so usually blockchains have safety, regular safety. Let's quickly go through in this slide what safety is. We consider that the protocol is executed in rounds, consider that we have a safe protocol here, and at the end of each round, each honest party outputs its stable chain. Consider that we have two honest parties here, and each party at the beginning of round, or at the end of round one, they report the Genesis block as their stable chain. Then at some later round, the chain of one party may grow, one block may enter the chain, the stable chain, and then the chain of the other party may grow even larger. But see that the chain of the first party is a prefix of the second party. And that's basically what safety says. So if the chain of the other party in some later round now becomes even larger, still the stable chain of one party must remain a prefix of the chain of the other party. Okay, that's what safety is. Now let's see what super safety is. Again, we have two honest parties, then the protocol proceeds in rounds, but now the protocol is super safe. In round one, both parties output the Genesis block as their stable chain. Now, in every other round, the chains must grow simultaneously. So let's say that a round passes, in the next round, and a block is added in the one party, this block is also added in the other party, in the other party's stable chain. And then some rounds may pass and no blocks extend the chain, but then a round comes that both parties grow their chains simultaneously and include the same block. And this is basically the property of super safety, honest chains growing at exactly the same time, growing simultaneously. Intuitively, super safety is hard to achieve due to network delays. For example, one party may receive a chain from the network before another party, and hence report this chain first. In this work, we introduce a way to achieve super safety with network delays under the assumption of synchronized clocks and a synchronous network. Dolph and Strong, in 1983, in a different time for consensus protocols, managed to achieve this property. However, their protocol is permissioned and does not support clients. Popular protocols like Bitcoin, Cardano, and Streamlit don't have this property. However, in this work, we show that by adding a gadget, basically you can transform these protocols in a black box fashion into super safe protocols. That's assuming that these protocols are safe, live, and timely. And why this may be useful is because building systems on top of super safe protocols instead of safe protocols may simplify things a bit, because you don't have to worry about prefixes. You know that every single party, every single honest party has the same chain as any other party at exactly the same time. To illustrate this a bit better, here's a blockchain protocol. Let's say we have Bitcoin. Bitcoin is live, safe, and as we will show later, is also timely. Now parties can communicate with each other, nodes can communicate with each other, and every node has a way to receive some input and output some output. Now, what you can do to turn this protocol super safe is, as I add a gadget on top of each of these Bitcoin nodes, and this gadget will now output a stable chain of its own. It will read the stable chain of the Bitcoin protocol of the honest party, and it will output a chain of its own. And this, adding this gadget, we have basically a client, a flexible client, that it's super safe. Okay, now what is the catch? Well, liveness becomes worse. You will have to wait longer to get a transaction confirmed if you use this gadget. And this tool can also be considered as a theoretical tool. Say you want to prove something on top of Bitcoin. You can use this gadget to turn Bitcoin super safe, and then maybe it's easier for you to prove this protocol on top of super safe Bitcoin instead of safe Bitcoin. Okay, let's see how this gadget works. Assume that we have a timely V protocol here. Then the gadget is going to take the stable chain of this timely protocol V and output a stable chain of its own. Now, the protocol proceeds in rounds. In round 1, the Genesis block is reported by the timely protocol. The gadget receives it and does nothing for now. Now, timeliness must be respected, so new blocks coming in must be relatively recent. They cannot be already mature, right? So after a while, also remember that the timestamps must be non-decreasing in this blockchain. And respecting timeliness, the chain of the timely protocol grows until there is a round that this Genesis block that it's now red will mature. It will become black. This is when the gadget is gonna take this mature block and report it into its own stable chain. Similarly, in the next round, the next 2 red blocks will also mature. And the gadget will also report these 2 blocks as its stable chain. So basically the gadget only reports the mature blocks of the timely protocol's chain. And this is how the protocol proceeds. Now, why is this super safe? Remember that from timeliness, we know that at every single point in time, all honest parties have received, or they know all mature blocks. Why is this? This is because no mature blocks can enter the stable chain anew. So at every point in time, every honest party must know all mature blocks, right? So if all honest parties know all mature blocks, then they can report them simultaneously. Okay, so now let's examine how a client would work here. So while we wait for the timely protocol to sync up and report its stable chain, we say that the gadget now it's bootstrapping and it's not super safe yet. We will have to wait. It will become super safe in a bit. And after the timely protocol stops syncing and reports its stable chain, well, the gadget can immediately gather all the mature blocks and report them in its stable chain immediately at the same time as all the other clients and become super safe. Okay, so this is how we get to super safety from timeliness. Now let's get back to why popular blockchains are timely to begin with. Let's use some blockchain protocol as an example and observe an honest party. In the beginning, in round 1, this honest party outputs the Genesis block. Again, the Genesis block is considered honest by definition and contains a timestamp that it's at the time of its creation, so this timestamp is recent. In the next round, time passes and the Genesis block becomes yellow, indicating that the timestamp written inside this block, which of course again has not changed, it says the time has passed, it has become older, the timestamp inside the Genesis block. Now consider that we have an adversary here, which creates the next block that gets included into the stable chain, and this adversary aims to break the timeliness of the system. So what it tries to do is introduce a block with a very old timestamp. That's her goal here. However, remember from the validity language that a chain must have the timestamp inside a chain must be non-decreasing. So the adversary here cannot create a block that it's already mature, because it must have a timestamp that it's after the timestamp of the block that it extends. So the best the adversary can do here is create a yellow block. She cannot create a red or a black block. Now again, in the next round, let's say the adversary creates a new block which extends the last adversarial block. This must also respect this validation rule that the timestamps inside the chain must be non-decreasing. Now, as you can see, if in the next round also the adversary creates the new block here, she will be able to introduce a mature block into the blockchain, into the stable chain. However, from liveness, we know that every once in a while, honest blocks appear in the stable chain. So, in the next round, a new honest block gets introduced into the chain. As you can see, this honest block is green. This makes sense because honest blocks include the timestamp of the time of their creation inside. So this timestamp must be relatively recent. So we depict it as green here. So what this honest block with a recent timestamp has basically done for us is that it bounds all the timestamps of the next blocks, of the blocks that come after this block. So in the next round, even if the block is adversarial, it must have a timestamp that it's after this honest block, right? So the best the adversary can do again is yellow. Then once again, she will try to introduce a block with as late of a timestamp not as late, as old of a timestamp as possible. But then once again, we're in the same spot that if the next block is adversarial, timeliness would basically break because the adversary would be able to introduce a black block, a mature block. So in the next round, again, an honest party comes along and bounds the timestamps of all the blocks that come after it. Okay, so this is how we show that popular blockchains, this is a proof sketch of why popular blockchains like Bitcoin, Cardano, and Streamlit are timely. In the paper, we calculate the exact timeless parameter V for each of these protocols, Bitcoin, Cardano, and Streamlit, and also have a generic proof for longest chain protocols. Now, to prove this, we have assumed a synchronous network. However, what happens if we are in the partially synchronous setting? So, in this work, we have an impossibility result that timeliness is impossible before GST in the partially synchronous setting. Okay, consider that we have a protocol that it's always safe, but only live after GST. Also consider here that we have a certain number of parties, we are in the permission setting, and the adversary, before GST, what she does is that she partitions the network in such a way that over 2/3 of the parties are on the one side of the network and the rest of the parties are isolated on the other side of the network. Additionally, one of the parties in the supermajority of the network is controlled by the adversary. It is adversarial. Now, what the adversary does is, before GST, she introduces a block with the current timestamp and sends this block to the supermajority of the network. The adversary keeps the communication between the supermajority of the network intact. So networks are exchanged like expected. But for the rest of the network, for the minority of the network, the adversary keeps these parties isolated. So they don't receive this block. Now, the supermajority of the parties here do not know if the minority of the parties are honest or went offline, or if they're adversarial. They don't know. So they must confirm this block. So at some point, they confirm this block with a timestamp that it's before the time of confirmation. This is because you cannot have a timestamp inside a block in the future. You cannot have a future timestamp. Okay, so at this point, the supermajority of the network confirms this block. Now, what the adversary does is she sets the GST to be V rounds after the time of confirmation. And as you can see, after GST, everyone must confirm. This is due to liveness and safety. So, the rest of the network will, after GST, will receive this block, and due to liveness and safety, will have to eventually confirm this block. And also due to safety, add it in the same exact spot as all the other parties did before GST. Additionally, the timestamp recorded inside this block will be the same as the one that the parties had before GST. Okay, as you can see, a block was introduced into some honest parties that has a timestamp that it's more than V rounds old. That means that timeless was violated here. So this is the proof sketch for the impossibility for timeless before GST in the partially synchronous setting. Coming to the end of the presentation, I would like to talk a bit about timestamps. You may be asking at this point, why do we care so much about timestamps? Why don't we use block heights everywhere instead of timestamps? And there are many deployed optimistic protocols that have some sort of dispute period that use timestamps. Why are we not using blocks there? Well, block heights are a logical clock, but do not have any strong guarantees about the real-world time. And this is probably fine if we have a standalone blockchain operating all by itself. However, as we approach a multi-chain world, where we have multiple blockchains that all communicate with each other, and this whole system communicates with the real world, there seems to be a need to have a universal way to measure time in these systems. So we sort of need a universal clock, and this is what timestamps provide here. And if we're going to use this universal clock, we need to have some guarantees about the accuracy of these timestamps. And this is where timeliness comes in. Summarizing, there are many deployed protocols that rely on the accuracy of on-chain timestamps, and if the protocol designers do not take into account the timeliness parameter V of the blockchain being used, they might be vulnerable to timestamp manipulation attacks. Then we introduce timeliness. This property of timeliness that we introduced in this work tells us that new blocks coming into stable chains anew cannot have very old timestamps. Then we showed a proof sketch of why popular blockchains are timely. This is because honest blocks get included into the stable chain every once in a while, and these honest block timestamps bound the timestamps of all the blocks that come after them. Then we have our impossibility result. Timeliness is not possible before GST in the partially synchronous setting. This is because we don't have liveness before GST. And then timeliness can be reduced to super safety in a black box fashion. So if we have a timely protocol, we can use a gadget and get a super safe flexible client that all of these clients report the same stable chain at exactly the same time. This work is uploaded on ePrint, so feel free to scan the barcode and take a look.